Hello. We're live. We're here. It's been a couple of weeks, it's long gaps in the winter without doing any of these live episodes. And in the absence of Goose shows, we did have a pretty significant, I'd say, couple of Rick shows this weekend. He joined for now the third time, joined Phil Lesh and friends, this time venturing to Denver to the Mission Ballroom for 2 nights. We had always almost there co-host Kev attended the first night of the run. Unfortunately, he's not able to make the pod today, but we had the illustrious Mr. Brian Brinkman of HF Pod and Beyond the Pond and other intelligent music podcasts here, who was there last night.
I was, yeah.
Hi, Brian.
It was really hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
It's great. Anytime I have a chance to kill an hour or maybe 2, I don't know how long we're going to go on this, but with you talking about Goose and Fish and music in general, I'm always game for. So I'm really happy to join you today.
Thank you. Yeah, you know what? I'm pretty sure this is your first time as a guest on Always Almost There. So that's significant.
I think it really comes down to the fact that I send you blistering hot takes via text about the Goose jam bracket, and you just won't let me on to talk about it. So I'm just going to hijack this time to say, how did you people not put the Glens Falls Madhuvan in the jam bracket? It is one of the best jams of the year. It is absolutely mind-blowing to me that it's not even in the bracket. Just not even in the bracket. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
I ranked it. Blame the community who didn't rank it. So let's talk about these Phil shows. We're gonna we'll do some bracket talk towards the end. Of course, we can't have an episode without a little bit of bracket talk. But first night, we're gonna spend a little more time talking about last night because that's the one you were in attendance for. But first night, it was interesting because I was at Fish at the end of December. Oh yes, sorry. You're blaming the wrong person. You got to blame Fish.
This is true. I gotta go to the hotline.
It was interesting, approaching this with Jason Crosby on keys instead of Medeski, who I had seen in October. And I know Crosby and Holly Bowling had played with this lineup in December at the Warfield, but obviously I was at Fish and didn't watch those shows. We didn't have a recap for those. But it was good on the first night. It felt like it took a little while for them to settle in. I think by the time they hit that China Cat new speedway towards the end of the first set, really, really excellent stuff happening. You could see Kev, who was like 3 rows back in the crowd. You could see him on the webcast pretty clearly. Tall guy blocking the view of hundreds behind him as he does. But that was great. Our first David Crosby tribute cover of the weekend in Long Time Gone, which I thought was really good. And really, the help slip half step Franklin's in the second set was just really, really amazing stuff. Rick getting to sing Help on the Way and half step, obviously his Ship of Fools early on in the first set, also excellent. I think, again, we're going to talk about this when we talk about last night, but Rick's being underutilized vocally in this lineup, very much so. And I know that there are a few incredible vocalists on stage. Then there are a couple of not as incredible vocalists. But, we'll get to that. But let's talk about last night, Brian. I know you've been to the Mission Ballroom a good amount as somebody who lives in Denver. But talk about, getting in, the pre-show vibe. What was it like?
It was great. I mean, the Mission Ballroom opened in summer 19. The first show I saw there was a Tab show. That was my first Tab show in, I think, 15, 16 years at that point in time. I was like 5 rows back. The sound is amazing. They have figured out this thing that it seems just like a massive challenge for so many venues across the country. You could be in the middle of the floor, in the middle of a GA floor at the Mission Ballroom, and go either to your left or your right to go and get drinks or go to the bathroom and be back in your spot in 5 minutes. There's just the crowd management, the ease of people where they're congregating. It's fantastic. It's one of my favorite venues to go to. It's just the perfect size. Feels like a big room, but it's really like a small confined amount of people. But I saw Goose close their fall 2021 tour there, and they sold out both nights, Sunday and Monday night. You could tell how excited they were coming in on a Monday night to another packed house. Getting in is pretty
I
seamless.
hear they played a good Arcadia on that Monday show.
Oh my God. And that Arcadia, I just want to note, well, as we get into the set list here, I had a callback to that Arcadia during a certain moment in this show where I felt like I was back in that jam. It was incredible. And it was all Rick led. But, in terms of the mission, it's in this kind of industrialized part of Denver. It's being built up. There's a ton of restaurants that are going to go in the area right around there. There's a bunch of apartments. So it still feels very much under construction. But once you're in, it's a pretty seamless process in. It's an open room, all GA seating. I grabbed some seats with my wife and another couple that we went with. Up top, Trevor side, just a little bit kind of on an angle back. So we had seats. We had the ability to kind of see over everyone. We had nobody in our way. Great view of the light show. And even when you're in the back of the room at the mission, it's just one of those venues that like you feel every note, you feel everything throughout the entire venue. There's no kind of dead sound spot in it. So just from an aesthetic standpoint, obviously it takes a long time for Phil and friends to get on stage. The room was full for a good hour before they walked out, but great music, great little video show for the audience. Just like a really fun chill hang beforehand.
Love it. Yeah, they went on very, very late on Saturday night. They actually, I turned on the webcast like 4 minutes into Shakedown Street last night because I was expecting them to go on around.
It was about 20 minutes earlier last night, right?
Yeah. They went on 50 minutes after ticket time on Saturday, which, we're making jokes like, now we know which member of Goose is the problem.
Right.
But yeah, last night they went on a punctual 30 minutes after ticket time. Fantastic Shakedown Street opener. Obviously I missed the first few minutes, but I caught all the solos, which is really the important part. Jason Crosby threw in a nice little stash tease in his solo, which I know lgoose.net is not a Phil Lesh and Friends database site, but the tease has been noted because
well done.
I can't not.
Done. You can't not. You have to.
Yeah. But yeah, what was that like?
It was a good opener. I mean, I think, just looking from a general standpoint, the set list was really strong. It was a ton of bangers. I was texting with some friends who used to see Phil Lesh a lot in like the mid 2000s when there were a ton of like Ryan Adams covers and stuff thrown in, and a lot of like late era Phil songs. Like it feels like now he's playing these scattered shows, artists like Rick, joining him for these, who are clearly excited for the opportunity to play Grateful Dead songs with a living member of the Grateful Dead, especially Phil Lesh, who had such an incredible impact on like the peak period of the Grateful Dead in the early 70s. His bass does everything in those jams. So to have that opportunity, like you want to play big Grateful Dead songs. And so to open with Shakedown, big callback to huge Dead shows from the 80s and 90s. I loved it. James Casey's vocals, I knew the guy was an incredible singer, but to hear him sing Jerry lines and to hear him add his own flavor to kind of the ends of a line or to various verses, to do a call and response with the crowd in a way that didn't feel cheesy at all. Like it was a special kind of kickoff to it. Everybody got like a roundabout solo and did a nice job of setting the table for where the evening was going to go and leading us into Sugary.
Yeah, and your point about James's vocals on this song is one of the reasons why J-Rad has also been such a success, because not all the members of J-Rad are lifelong Deadheads. They like a couple of them are, but they discovered the material later, and so learning it and playing it, they put their own flavor on it as opposed to just trying to be faithful to Jerry or the original material. And so I feel like the Tab Horns fill a similar role. The three of them, they've been playing with Trey for a really long time, but they, barely even know the Fish, like what Fish does. Right.
Right.
It's interesting to hear them put their own flavor on it. And James, whose vocals I think are very underutilized with Tab. Fun fact for anybody who doesn't know, he was actually the original vocalist of Soul Planet in 2017 before Fish debuted it. Yeah, if you go back and listen to the fall 2017 versions of Soul Planet played by Tab. James sings it. It's really cool. And then Fish started playing it, and Tab hasn't played it since. So
Interesting.
I wonder if that's a touchy subject, but
Touch subject for a lot of people. I mean, I think, just jumping ahead, like his singing on Eyes of the World, that is as canon as it gets for Grateful Dead. That is, you take a percentage of the fan base, I think you're probably pushing upwards of 50-60% who would call that the best Grateful Dead song ever. And so it's the kind of thing that, like, when you reinterpret it, it's a very sensitive type of issue. For me, listening to him, it almost made me hear that song as well as the one that followed this. We'll get to this in the second set, but it almost made me hear these songs in a completely different light, because the vocalist was putting their own stamp on it in a way that gives you this sense. I got this a lot last night. Like, there's a reason why the Grateful Dead legacy lives on through the members who are still alive as well as cover bands, because when you're in a room with a group of people, it's a very, very simple idea, but just hearing their music, it conveys a touchstone to larger American musical history, but it also is this vibe that is just, it's replicable, and it's reinterpreted, and it works in a way that, I don't know, it allows for your own kind of touch to it, in the same way that, like, like traditional standard folk songs, you want to play the songs, the chords right, but you want to give your own spin, your own touch to it, the same way that jazz works. It really showcases how much the Grateful Dead is just like an institution of American culture.
Very well said. So speaking of putting their own spin on the vocals, back to the first set, we've got Sugary. We've got a little bit of vocal trading on this one. Natalie takes the first verse. Sounds excellent. Great solos on this one. I felt that Rick definitely got a good amount of guitar spotlighting over these two shows this weekend. Felt like he was more at the forefront musically than he had been in October. But vocally, he's still, obviously, as we mentioned, should be singing more songs. Like, I'd love to hear him sing High Time. Thank you, came to play. Grandma on High Time changed my life. What kind of change? That's what I want to know. What kind of change?
Well, there's a lot there. And I think, to your point about the initial vocals, I thought Natalie crushed the first set, and I was really excited for her to take the song just based on her, the way that she sang. And then Jen comes in, and Jen just has this, like, very natural, theatrical, almost operatic voice that, like, for a second I was like, man, very powerful. And, like, she can just hit these, like, dirty low notes that, like, just scream kind of 2 a.m. at a blues bar type of thing. But at the same time, she's never losing, she's never going out of tune. She's just, she sings it in this very organic but beautiful way. It was interesting to hear her take the second verse and then, like, it go back to Natalie, and it be, I mean, Natalie was great, but, like, Jen, like, really took this song in a powerful direction. But from a soloing standpoint, I think that there comes a point in anyone who gets into the Grateful Dead where, like, for like a 3-week stretch of time, you think that Sugary is the greatest song that's ever been written. And, like, you listen to, like, 1977 versions, and you're just like, there's nothing else that needs to happen in music.
You live inside 15 minutes of Jerry playing Sugary, and you're like, wow, how does it get better than this?
It like, Fish's, like, Down with Disease works in this manner. Like, Goose has, type 1 segments of jams that, like, really showcase Rick's guitar technique, and they never leave the key of where the band is at, and you almost don't need them to. Down with Disease sometimes obviously has huge type 2 jams, but Down with Disease will have these great type 1 versions where all you need to do is live in the world of Down with Disease. And Sugary is like that, just like times 10. I don't ever need Sugary to go into a dark, spacey area. I just need 25 minutes of that zone. And you got that throughout this. They were passing around solos. It was really nice. And it was really kind of the first time where you heard Rick. He had a solo in Shakedown, but there was a moment in Sugary where it was like, okay, you're feeling more comfortable. You're feeling like you can put your imprint on this. I felt it was interesting. Like I didn't see his pedal board, but it was clear that it was very like slimmed down compared to what
Yeah.
he usually travels with. A lot of the Rick toys that you hear throughout kind of the weird jams of winter 2022, you weren't hearing any of that come out. It was very um, I'm gonna, kind of bow down to the greatness of the Grateful Dead, and I'm going to just try to play my guitar in as pure a way as possible, much the same way that Trey approached Fare Thee Well back in 2015.
Yeah, I also find that when playing the music of the Grateful Dead, you need a lot less, or you don't need, but there's a lot less um, time where you're like, I feel like you're inclined to use heavier effects and stuff like that. I think with Goose, like he has all these different reverbs and delays and looper pedals and what have you.
Yeah,
That's not really necessary with the music of the Dead. Like for me, like if I were to be playing keyboards in a Fish or Goose cover band, I'd be like, okay, I want to have piano, I want to have organ, I want to have electric piano, I want to have clav, I want to have some synths, like whatever. For the Grateful Dead, piano, electric piano, and organ. Right. Like
That's
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 it.
it.
So
Yeah,
there's less you need because, as you mentioned, like some of the music is more inside the box, but the outside
yeah.
the box stuff doesn't like feel like
It's letting the
it's more
instruments
grounded.
get you outside the box rather than any sort of effects. Which,
Exactly.
being in my 30s and growing up with Fish and now Goose, I'm drawn to those effects because that's part of like the modern technology that like I see music in. But when I listen to Grateful Dead, you go to some of those like 73 playing in the bands, Dark Stars, they're not putting any effects on anything and they're just getting as far out into the outer reaches of music as possible. And
Yep.
I think that there's
Jazz.
yeah, and but I think I was thinking a lot last night. Just I focused the majority of my viewing on Rick's performance. It seemed like a really cool challenge for him to play these songs that are hyper complicated in terms of like their melody and in terms of their rhythm and in terms of how they flow, but not having the ability to rely on any sort of effects to allow him to push further. And so that allowed him to, really showcase his straightforward, just like guitar riffing, but also what he could get out of his own immediate tone.
Yes, absolutely. That was a really good tangent, I think.
I like him.
Next
I
up,
like
we get
tangents.
Deep Ellum Blues. More of this great vocal trading. I really, really enjoyed this one. Not a super common song that the Dead played, I don't think, but I love when they'll really take a song like this out for a walk. Really excellent rendition. And then we get Rick singing Direwolf, which was amazing. Very happy to hear that. And then I feel like the first like significant improv of the night we
Yes.
get in the wheel here.
Yeah.
And I know like you have a lot to say about this wheel.
Yeah, this is my favorite Grateful Dead song. And when I looked at the set list for the night before, I was sad not to get a Help Slip Franklin's. I was sad not to get a Dark Star, but I was pleased that they did not play the wheel. I have seen Grateful Dead entities, you know, probably somewhere in the 5 to 10 range. I really don't go out to see a ton of like Grateful Dead, like Offspring type of shows. I listen to the Grateful Dead a lot, and so I've never actually seen. I've never actually seen them play the wheel, and once I caught them like getting into it, I lost it.
Yeah.
Um, Phil on the vocals, it's a song about aging and it's a song about time just going on regardless of us and this unending process. And it's a song that I think only the Grateful Dead could have written. And to hear him singing it just shy of his 83rd birthday, when he's still totally with it, he's still totally physically able to do this. Like there wasn't, I mean, the music of the Dead is slower now than it was in the past, and it was always slower than like some of the music we're accustomed to in this jam band world now. But I never felt like anyone had to like take a step back to, accompany Phil's playing. So like he's still playing the music in such an inspired way, and hearing him sing those lyrics with the tab horns and then it go off into this jam, and Rick really take control of this jam. There's a moment where they're playing a wheel in improvisational segment, and he throws these kind of minor keyed licks in that
Mhm.
my first thought was the 11/22/21 Arcadia, where it just felt like it reached into that place of, you know, he found a melody that will tug at your heartstrings in a way that Goose is so good at doing, and the entire band followed him. It was the first moment where it felt to me as though Rick wasn't kind of looking for approval to do something. He just
He
went
was
with an
doing it.
idea.
Yeah.
He was just doing it, and everyone else said, "Cool, man, we're following you."
Yeah.
And that, there's an element of these shows that almost feel like a networking event for Rick. Like he's in front of this crowd that may not necessarily have been bought into Goose, may not necessarily have been exposed to Goose, and if you see him in the right setting here, it's going to, really help to continue to expand their fan base and create an element of credibility
Yeah.
around the music that they play for a very established older crowd of people that still go to these shows. And it felt like the moment where it was like, this is no longer Rick playing the music of the Grateful Dead and complimenting it. This is Rick putting his imprint on the music of the Grateful Dead, and the music of the Grateful Dead following him for a short period in time. And I just, that's it, dude. Like that's why I went to the show. That
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. As I said before, his guitar contributions to the band and leadership over the last two nights was really excellent. And yeah, while he may not have sang as many songs as we probably would have liked, every time the camera panned past him while he was playing, he was in the zone. Rick doesn't generally, smile or react a ton while playing, even with Goose. But here you could tell he was like in the zone. He was like ready to do it. Now, I don't know how many of the, 4,000 or whatever people at the Mission, like if you're a Deadhead living in Denver at this point, I don't know how it's possible to not have been exposed to Goose based on how much they've played there. But it's possible. It's entirely possible. Then the first set closes. Oh, yes.
I was just going to say, I think that they're at this unique place where, they keep getting, they keep winning over fans, with each of these steps forward, but they're still at a place where you can still avoid them in a way that if you're in the jam scene, you can't really avoid Fish. And then there was a certain point where you couldn't avoid Fish. And it was, this is what the next thing is. And I feel like Goose is right on the cusp of that, but you're right. Like they come through here a lot. There's a ton of Grateful Dead adjacent stuff. I cannot imagine this is the last time that we're going to hear Rick with this lineup in Denver. So my hope is that, this could be a great show at Broomfield at some point here in the future.
Ooh, would be cool. First set closes with David Crosby cover, Laughing. Very nice. You could tell Phil was very emotional at set break both nights after paying tribute to Cros. Interesting tidbit for anybody who didn't know, more of a Bobby Cros fun fact than a Phil one, but David Crosby actually wrote the guitar riff of Playing in the Band.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Bobby said this. I was watching one of his streams in like 2020 when he was doing from TRI Studios or Try or whatever it is. And he was like, fun fact, David Crosby actually wrote this guitar lick. And then
that's crazy.
I don't remember if it was Jesse Jarno or someone who maybe was like, that's not true. Like Bobby doesn't know what he's talking about. So
they never do. They never do. You never trust Trey with any sort of Fish dates. And I'm sure in 20 years, Rick or Peter are going to completely screw up Goose history as well.
Yeah. Luckily, we're now in a time when everything is much more documented than it was in like the 60s. So, hopefully in 20 years, we can be like, no, Rick, that's not correct. Yeah. So anyway, second set, we get a St. Stephen's sandwich with 8 Miles High in the middle. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is St. Stephen seemed to find itself in a ton of sandwiches in the late 70s and the 80s when they brought it back. I mean, this second set, we'll get into it, but like this is an entire set of bangers.
Yeah.
And Phil takes very long set breaks. It was at least 50 minutes before they walked back on stage. They kept showing them just hanging out backstage.
Yeah, I love when they do that. It's like, okay, like
they're just like hanging around, having a beer. Like, all right, guys, come on.
Yeah.
But they came on and there was like a little bit of ambiance, and they jump into Saint Stephen, and it's one of those songs that it and this happened throughout the entire second set. Every single person in the audience, from your biggest deadhead to your kind of casual noob, they all know this song. They know the lick. Everybody freaks out, and there's like moments in the song where every single person is shouting back at the stage song, lyrics to them. And I thought it was a really cool jam. Went into 8 Miles High really nicely. It was kind of the first moment where I remember looking over at the tab horns and kind of wondering like what was going on. They tried to interject some horns, and then the band decided to take the jam into a different direction, which I guess is what was leading them into 8 Miles High. It felt, the drawback of these shows is that I can't imagine there's a ton of rehearsal time. There's probably a lot of individual rehearsal time, a lot of planning around the set list, and then you get up there and you're both supposed to solo and improvise, but also get to these other songs that everybody's practiced and ready to go.
Right. From there, we get into the meat from here.
This is like an hour
meat.
and a half of amazing music. This was the best.
Let's start with the Scarlet Eyes here.
Yeah.
Okay, we get Scarlet. Rick's singing Scarlet. He sang it in October. We knew it was going to be awesome, and then proceeds to just rip it. Like I love Rick singing Grateful Dead tunes, whether it's like Broke Down and Ship of Fools or Scarlet. He just sounds so good singing these songs. But yeah, this Scarlet is amazing. Then it leads into Eyes, and as you mentioned before, James Casey's vocals, just like Shakedown, he's putting his own flavor in it, and it's just amazing. And then this Eyes jam, he gets into he busts out the soprano sax, and is doing some like really cool stuff. But the Eyes was a James Casey highlight. It was his birthday on Saturday night. Big 40 for James. And just he was on fire all weekend, but especially in that Eyes.
Yeah, I mean, and the Scarlet goes into a bit of the 11, which is a favorite of mine. To get that, it kind of added a little bit of darkness to the overall Scarlet. I thought we were going to get a Fire at some point, but that's just like kind of set listing aspects. Scarlet, when you nail the solo, kind of the same way that like when Trey nailed the Hunger Site solo with Goose, like there are just certain moments in songs where like you have to really come to bat for this solo. And when Rick nailed it in Scarlet, it was a huge moment. But Eyes, I got big Nassau 1990 type of vibes from it. Branford Marsalis, like the way that James Casey added his own touch to it. It diverted the song, it changed the song, but it also felt a part of Dead history. And then we go into Stella Blue, which, I have a dog named Stella Blue. This is this is an amazing moment for me to get this song. And, Jen completely reshapes what is possible within this song. Like her vocals, especially towards the end, like, I mean, it's a powerful, dark, haunting song that really was only done best when Jerry's voice was somewhat broken in the late 80s and early 90s, and you heard the pain and like the suffering in him. She added that completely in a way that I was totally taken by. It was a beautiful performance. The whole venue was going crazy. It really makes you think. Yeah. One of the challenges that Phish has is their ballads tend to be, okay, I'm going to go take a piss. I'm going to go grab a beer. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to hang out with my buddies here.
Right.
The thing that Goose has that they learned from the Dead, it seems like, is that the ballads do not need to be a showstopper. They when properly listened to, when properly played, they just add to what the show actually is. And Stella Blue right here in the middle of the second set did that.
Yeah, and Jen's vocals are amazing. I forgot that she had sang this one in October and was really excited to hear her on it. I was a little worried that we were going to get a Graham vocal, but we did not. So Jen was great. Again, with Jen's vocals, like they pick really, really good songs for her to sing. Like when she did That's What Love Will Make You Do in October, that was phenomenal. Would love to hear this lineup play that again. I hope we do. From there, we get another little bit of jamming in the Let It Grow. Graham takes this one, but still great song.
Yeah, this
I'd
is
like
one
to
of my
hear Rick
this.
sing.
Yeah. So this and The Wheel are my two favorite Grateful Dead songs. So to get them in each set was pretty amazing. Let It Grow is a really hard song. The biggest compliment I can give to Graham, and I was thinking about this a lot throughout the second set, and especially during Let It Grow, he has played these Grateful Dead songs more than anyone on that stage aside from Phil Lesh and John Molo. And you can tell that he gets the weird rhythm and the weird timing that comes with how these songs were written.
Yeah,
Anyone who plays guitar out there, who plays any instrument, who tries to learn Grateful Dead songs, a lot of the chords are pretty straightforward. And then
it's the timing.
you start to play them, and you're like, I sound so stiff, and this is not how these songs feel. I have no interest in playing this in front of another person ever again. And you listen to this and you get the sense of like, okay, Graham gets it. He gets like how weird this stuff has to be. And him and John going back and forth as they walked up to the chorus and all the weird timing in there, they nailed it. Like for the most part, it was really impressive. The jam off this was really cool in great fashion. I mean, Let It Grow was one of the greatest jammers that the Grateful Dead had. I thought this was going to close the set, just the way that the intensity was towards the end of Let It Grow.
Mm-hmm.
And they had one more treat in store for us.
But they had one more treat in
They had
store.
one more treat in store for us.
Obviously, I'm gonna go nuts when when they play Terrapin because it's Terrapin. But then the fact that Rick got to sing the first part of the song like that I mean, as a Goose fan, also that being in the room, that must have been very, very special.
Yeah, it's Terrapin is to the Grateful Dead what You Enjoy Myself is to Fish. And who knows where we go over the next 30 years in terms of Fish history, and in terms of, are we going to get a Trey and Friends type of tour in 2035 where it's Trey playing Fish songs with all these musicians who've been inspired by the band? You can imagine people wanting to play You Enjoy Myself with him and add their own flavor to it. I have no idea if that's going to actually happen, but like you get that sense with Terrapin. This is a song that like it is a lasting legacy for the Grateful Dead. It's their stamp on prog rock. It's their stamp on creating this own universe of their own. It's a beautiful lyricized song. The way it builds and ebbs and flows. I mean, it's unbelievable. And to have Rick be the guy who takes the first couple verses of it, I mean, I'm at a point as a diehard Fish fan and a huge Grateful Dead fan where the band that excites me the most right now is Goose, and to hear Rick put his like shed his own inspiration into a song like this, my God.
Yeah, it was an excellent,
all the feels, man.
yeah, especially with the vocal harmonization second half of the song. Oh,
Yeah,
beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
And then we get another Crosby song in the encore. Very nice. It's really cool to see, especially because I don't recall, I don't stay that up to date on Phil and Friends lineups, but I don't recall a lineup getting this many shows, together, at least in recent years, besides something like the Q. But they played in October, they played in December, they played this past weekend, they're playing again in March. They're even doing, in March in Chicago, they're doing 2 shows with this lineup without Rick, because he'll be playing at the Cap with Goose, which I'm very, very excited for. And it was so funny to me the other day when they announced that Warren Haynes was playing with the lineup in March 11th and 12th. And I was saying to some people, like, we live in a world where Warren Haynes is Phil Lesh's second choice after Rick. Like, what?
Says something.
Like that's awesome. So
yeah,
it's really cool.
I mean, his rise, man. Like, we've talked about this offline, but like, 3 years ago right now, they were opening up for some other jam band on the West Coast. Yeah, just some other jam band on the West Coast. And blowing them away every night. And, people like myself were finally becoming hip to the idea of what this band was and realizing that, this whole life I'd led, catching up to Fish, being a 2.0 kid, catching up to the Grateful Dead, never having seen Jerry in the flesh, to find a band that like seems to have something and seems to be building for the long term, to fast forward 3 years from now and have them be in a place where Rick is so coveted to play these kind of shows. And argument can be made like the Tab tour. I mean, that was a much bigger deal for him. That was
Of
it
course.
was it was him really measuring himself in a lot of ways in those jams, against and alongside of Trey. Not necessarily in like a negative competitive way, but just kind of like, hey, this is what I can do.
Hmm.
You show me, you the expert, show me what you can do, and let me try to like match you in any sort of way. And he really, lived up to that overall challenge. This is like, this is less like, hey, I'm going to show you all my skills, and more, am I a part of the legacy of this whole scene? And
Yeah.
am I a part of what this all means? And I think there's something almost more difficult about that. I kept thinking throughout the show, like, he can't just step, he's the best musician on the stage. Okay. Like, legacy wise, Phil Lesh probably, but like Phil Lesh is, diminished, just by age. Like, that's just the
Right.
reality. Rick is the best musician up on that stage, and yet it never felt like Rick was taking the spotlight away from the rest of the band. And
Mm-mm.
that balance of like hanging in the shadows, showcasing yourself, but not over showcasing yourself is really, really hard to do. And that's beyond talent. That's like, that's where I get the like networking thing where like he has to come away from this winning over people who may not know who he is or may be skeptical of who he is. And I'm totally biased in saying this, but I feel like he did that in droves.
Amazing. Yeah, this is also cool because we're going to see him play with a slightly different lineup in March at the Cap as well. Medeski's coming back, which is very exciting. But also we've got, they're doing March 15th, 17th, 18th, and 19th at the Cap. And we have the Tab Horns on one night. And then for the other three, I believe we're going to have, instead of the three Tab Horns, there's going to be Nikki Bloom on vocals and Katie Jacoby on violin.
That'll be really
Which
nice.
I think those are when they're playing. Obviously, the information is on the internet if you're going to those. But I'm looking forward to hearing how that different sound in the lineup helps. And, I'm hoping to see a little more interplay between Rick and Medeski this time around. We had a bit of it in October, but they were still, I think, kind of feeling each other out. But this is really exciting. It's really cool. We're only a month away from more Goose shows now, so very excited.
Yeah, what do we
for it.
got? 5 nights at the Cap?
Well, we've got Okeechobee first on March 3rd, and then we've got 5 nights at the Cap, and then we've got Spring Tour. Very, very excited. Obviously, open invitation for people who want to come on these day after shows. The spots are filling up very, very quickly. We're still looking to fill in a lot of the West Coast dates. Please shoot us a DM on socials at AAT Goosepod if you would like to be on an episode of Day After Show. We want to have lots of different people on because it's fun hearing everybody's thoughts on Goose. And 10 days from now, on February 16th, Thursday, February 16th at 3:00 p.m. Eastern, we are going to be doing a live to talk about the bracket. It will be at the end of the Sweet 16. A couple of very, very special surprises in store for that episode. Do not miss it. Put it in your calendar right now, Thursday, February 16th at 3:00 p.m. Eastern time. You do not want to miss this episode. It's going to be excellent.
I won't miss that episode, I promise.
Fantastic. And, of course, keep getting involved in the Goose bracket. We are well into the second round. We have just started our second region of the second round. Votes are going well. People are getting involved. It's a lot of fun. Brian, I've noticed that you're doing much better than me in the bracket prediction challenge right now.
I read the audience well. I read, what the overall mood of 2022 was well, and I stand by it. The Glens Falls Madhuvan. I don't know how more of you didn't recognize that it is one of the greatest moments in Goose history. It's them embracing Fish Fall 1994, just dystopian energy. It is a step forward for the band, and I will sit on this horse until it is fully recognized and people admit that they overlooked greatness.
There you go. If you've learned one thing in the last 40 minutes, is that you should have put that Madhuvan on your list.
There we go. Came to play. You got it. We're right there.
There you go. All right. So, Brian, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you, Ryan.
Having you on when next time you see a Goose show.
Hopefully in April. Still working out the details, but I'm hoping to be at the Seattle shows. So
fantastic.
Maybe we'll be talking again.
Hope so too. I hope so. Thank you everybody for tuning into this episode of Day After Show Live. We will see you